The moment I stepped outside, I felt like I had walked into a different world. My peaceful, quiet backyard, where I had planned to spend my Saturday reading a book and sipping lemonade, had been turned into a scene straight out of a reality TV disaster. Tables covered in pink cloths were scattered around. A DJ was setting up huge speakers near my rose bushes, and a guy I didn't recognize was carefully arranging a nacho fountain like it was a priceless artifact. Strangers were everywhere, carrying trays of food, setting up chairs, and laughing like they belonged. And at the center of it all, clipboard in hand, like she was the queen of the world, was Karen, my neighbor, my nemesis, the uninvited, unwelcome nightmare of a neighbor. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just a casual barbecue. This was a full-blown event, the kind you'd expect to find at a wedding venue, not in my backyard. My backyard. My property. My blood pressure shot up as I took a step forward, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. Karen, what the hell is this? Karen turned slowly, a sugary smile plastered on her face like she had been expecting me, but also like she was annoyed I had the audacity to question her. Oh, hey, Jake. I was hoping you'd be out later so we could avoid all this, she waved vaguely, making it seem like I was the one causing the issue. I crossed my arms. You want to explain why there's a DJ in my backyard? She laughed, waving a hand like I had cracked the funniest joke. Oh, it's just a little party. Nothing major. Just a few friends and family. You don't mind, right? I stared at her deadpan. You mean the 50 people setting up tables and food stations in my yard? She sighed dramatically, as if I was the unreasonable one. Jake, don't exaggerate. Right at that moment, 2 people walked by, carrying a huge cake table between them. I raised an eyebrow. Karen glanced at them, then back at me, huffing. Okay, fine. Maybe a little more than a few. But it's for my sister's baby shower, and you have such a lovely, open space. It would have been a shame not to use it. I clenched my jaw so tight I thought my teeth would crack. A shame not to use it? Karen, this is my backyard. You didn't ask me. You didn't even tell me. You just took over like you own the place. Karen rolled her eyes, the way she always did when she was about to say something infuriating. Oh, come on. It's just a few hours. You barely use your backyard anyway. That did it. That did it. I felt my fingers curl into fists at my sides. That's not the point. You don't get to decide whether I use my yard or not. It's mine. Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. Excuse me, sir? You're blocking the catering setup. I turned around to see a man in a suit, holding a clipboard. He looked at me like I was the one causing the problem, like I was the intruder, like I had wandered into their party and was being difficult on purpose. I slowly turned back to Karen. You hired a catering company? She had the nerve to smile. Well, yeah, it's a big event. You don't think I just serve chips and soda, do you? I inhaled deeply, counted to 5, and exhaled. Karen took that as a sign I was calming down. She was wrong. I stepped forward, lowering my voice to a dangerously even tone. You have exactly 10 minutes to pack all of this up and get out of my yard. Karen gasped like I had just threatened to burn her house down. Jake, don't be selfish. Everyone's already here. The decorations are up. The cake is arriving in 20 minutes. Be a good neighbor, just this once. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. A good neighbor? You mean like asking permission before hijacking someone's property? Karen crossed her arms. You're making a scene. I gestured around at the absolute circus happening in my yard. Oh, I'm making a scene? I'm making a scene. At that moment, I heard a loud screech. I spun toward my front lawn, where I saw a silver SUV parked on my grass. The tires had dug into the soil, leaving deep grooves in what had once been perfectly manicured greenery. I turned back to Karen. Whose car is that? She barely glanced at it. Oh, that's Mark's. He's my cousin. There wasn't any space left on the street, so I told him he could park here. It's just grass, Jake. It'll grow back. I don't know what happened in that moment. Maybe something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the entitlement. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of Karen treating my home like some public park she could rent. Maybe it was the fact that she was so sure she could get away with it, just like she always did. What I do know is that I smiled. And not just any smile. A slow, deliberate, almost evil smile. Karen hesitated. Why are you looking at me like that? I took a step back. You know what, Karen? You're right. I am being a little selfish. You and your guests deserve to have the best experience possible. She eyed me suspiciously. What are you talking about? I shrugged, my smile widening. Don't worry about it. Enjoy your party. And with that, I turned around, walked inside, and grabbed my phone. I opened my smart sprinkler app, scrolled to the highest pressure setting, and hovered my thumb over the Activate All button. Karen wanted a party? She was about to get one. A very, very wet one. I stepped inside my house, leaned against the door, and inhaled deeply. My heart was pounding, but not from frustration anymore. It was from excitement. Karen had pushed her luck one too many times, and today, she was going to learn what happens when you cross the line. I opened my sprinkler app. It was a gift I had installed last year after I got tired of dealing with manual timers. At the time, I thought it was just a convenience. Today, it was a weapon. I scrolled through the settings, smirking as I noticed the customization options. Not only could I turn the sprinklers on remotely, but I could activate them in specific zones, control the water pressure, and even set unpredictable spray patterns. It was perfect. If I played this right, I could make it look like a complete accident at first. Karen wouldn't know what hit her until it was too late. I peeked through the blinds. The party was in full swing now. The DJ was testing his sound system. Guests were settling into their chairs, and Karen was making her rounds, basking in the attention as if she were the queen of the neighborhood. A waiter passed by, carrying a massive fruit platter, and I shook my head. She had turned my backyard into a five-star event space without so much as a courtesy text, but she was about to regret it. I tapped the screen, activating the first sprinkler zone, the one closest to the buffet table. It took a few seconds, but then, with a sharp hiss, the sprinkler heads popped up, and a powerful stream of water shot into the air. It was perfect. A direct hit. The nacho fountain took the brunt of it, cheese flying everywhere as guests shrieked and stumbled backward. Plates of food were knocked over. The carefully arranged fruit platter went tumbling into the grass, and the caterer was desperately trying to shield the dishes from the downpour. I covered my mouth to stifle the laugh that wanted to escape as Karen whipped around, her face a mix of shock and fury. She waved her arms, shouting over the noise. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" The caterer was frantically wiping down the ruined nacho fountain, looking like he was about to cry. "My equipment! My food! What's happening?" Karen spun around, searching for someone to blame. Her gaze landed on my house. Her eyes narrowed. I ducked away from the window before she could spot me. I waited a minute, then cautiously peeked again. Karen was now on the phone, probably calling someone to fix the sprinklers. Good luck with that. She had no idea the problem wasn't mechanical, it was me. I smiled and moved to phase 2. This time, I targeted the DJ booth. I cranked up the pressure and hit the button. A second later, another burst of water shot out, hitting the DJ right in the back as he reached for his laptop. He yelped, slipping on the wet grass and crashing into his table. The speakers emitted a terrible screech before everything went silent. The music cut out, leaving behind only the sounds of panicked guests and running water. The silence was almost deafening. Everyone turned to stare at the soaked DJ, who was now sitting in a puddle, looking utterly defeated. Karen gasped. "Are you kidding me? The DJ? The music? Oh, this is a disaster." I had to bite my fist to stop from laughing. It was going better than I had hoped, but I wasn't done yet. Karen ran over to the DJ, offering him a fake smile. "It's fine. Just dry off and get the music going again. We can still save this." The DJ gave her a deadpan look and glanced down at his now soaked laptop. "Lady, my equipment's fried." She groaned, turning to the crowd. "It's okay, everyone. Just a little technical difficulty. We'll be back on track soon." I nodded to myself. Time to step it up. I activated every sprinkler zone except for the one where Karen was standing. I wanted her to watch as her party fell apart. The water erupted in every direction. It was chaos. Guests screamed as they were drenched from all sides. The buffet table tipped over, sending food flying into the mud. Chairs flipped over as people scrambled to escape the water. The bounce house, which had taken up way too much space, started deflating under the relentless downpour, kids spilling out in a heap. It was like watching a ship sink in slow motion. Karen spun around frantically, her arms raised like she could stop the disaster with her will. "No, no, no. Stop it. Somebody turn it off." One of her relatives, an older woman in a floral dress, slipped and landed with a loud thud. Her husband tried to help her up, but lost his balance and fell next to her. A kid screamed as his balloon floated away, while his mom tried to drag him to safety. And through it all, Karen stood in the one dry spot I had left. I watched as she realized it. Her expression morphed from confusion to horror. She wasn't just unlucky. She was being targeted. Her gaze snapped to my house, her eyes locking onto the window where I stood. I gave her a slow wave. Her face turned red, and she stormed toward my back door, stomping through the soaked, muddy mess that had once been her perfect party. I met her at the door before she could pound on it. "You did this," she screamed, water dripping from her hair. "You ruined my sister's baby shower." I crossed my arms. "No, Karen. You ruined it when you decided to take over my backyard without asking." She let out an exasperated noise. "You're being petty. I was going to clean everything up after. You could have just let us have this one day." I tilted my head. "Oh, you mean the way you let me have my yard?" "Yeah, I didn't think so." Her jaw clenched. "You're going to regret this." I smirked. "Doubt it." At that moment, a loud squelching sound made us both look down. Karen had stepped into a patch of soaked, muddy grass. Her foot slipped, and before she could catch herself, she went down hard, landing right in the mess she had created. The remaining guests, those who hadn't already fled, stifled their laughs as she sat there, covered in wet grass and bits of ruined cake. I sighed dramatically. "Oh, Karen, you should really watch where you step." Her scream of frustration was the most satisfying sound I'd heard all day. She sat there in the mud, fists clenched, as she tried to push herself up. But every time she tried to stand, she just made it worse. Her expensive-looking heels sank into the mud. The second she tried to move, her foot slipped again, sending her sprawling right back into the mess. It was almost poetic. The remaining guests stood frozen, unsure whether to help her or pretend they hadn't seen anything. Some stifled their laughs, but Karen was too furious to notice. She finally managed to get up, wiping her face with her hands, only to smear what looked like a mix of cake frosting and wet grass. She turned on me with a look that could have burned down the neighborhood. "You think this is funny?" she shouted, voice shaking with rage. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, giving her a slow, deliberate nod. "A little bit, yeah." She let out a strangled sound of frustration, stomping toward me, her heels sinking deeper into the mud with every step. I had to admire her dedication. Most people would have given up, but not Karen. No, she was determined to come out on top, even if it meant doing it covered in filth. "You ruined everything," she spat, stopping just short of my porch. "Everything. The food, the decorations, the music. Do you even realize how much money I spent on this party?" I shrugged. "Didn't spend a dime on the venue, though, did you?" Her face turned an even deeper shade of red. Before she could launch into another tirade, a loud sloshing sound interrupted us. We both turned to see one of the folding tables finally collapse under the weight of the water, sending the last untouched plates of food splattering into the mud. A wave of sauce and soggy napkins exploded into the air like tragic fireworks. Karen made a strangled noise, her fists clenched so tight, I thought she might break a finger. One of her relatives, a man in a soaked button-up shirt, carefully waded toward her. Karen, maybe we should just call it a day." Karen spun on him like a tornado. "We are not calling it a day. We are fixing this. This is salvageable." The man gave her a long, doubtful look before glancing at the disaster zone that used to be my backyard. The mud, the scattered chairs, the ruined food, the deflated bounce house. Nothing to salvage. Another guest, a woman holding her dripping purse like it was a dead fish, sighed. "Karen, sweetie, it's over. Let's just go." Karen's breath came out in ragged gasps as she turned back to me. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just angry. She was humiliated. And the thing about people like Karen? They can't stand losing. She took a deep breath and forced an artificial smile onto her face. "Fine," she said, voice tight. "Fine. We'll leave." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, just like that." She tilted her chin up. "Just like that. We'll clean everything up first, of course. Because unlike you, I have manners." I didn't bother responding. I knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to make it seem like she was the bigger person, like she was gracefully bowing out, when in reality, she had no choice. One by one, the remaining guests started gathering their things, shuffling toward the exit, avoiding eye contact. Those who had brought gifts for the baby shower hesitated, unsure whether to retrieve them or leave them in the wreckage. Karen noticed and let out a frustrated sigh. "Just leave the gifts. We'll get them later." she snapped. I watched as they trudged toward their cars, some still soaked, others covered in mud. One woman yelped as she stepped onto the street, realizing her heels were completely ruined. Another man patted his pockets, muttering under his breath when he found his phone had been waterlogged. And then there was Karen, standing in the middle of it all, glaring at me like she had just won a war. "You're going to regret this," she said, voice low. I smiled. "Am I?" She didn't answer. She just turned and marched toward her car, nearly slipping again. One by one, the cars pulled away, leaving behind the wreckage of the worst baby shower in history. The decorations sagged under the weight of the water, bits of food floated in puddles, and the lawn looked like it had been hit by a stampede. It was glorious. I stepped off the porch, surveying the damage like a general after a victorious battle. There was a part of me that knew I'd have to deal with the aftermath. The mud would take weeks to dry, the grass might not survive, and I'd probably find bits of soggy cake in weird places for the next month. But it was worth it. I turned off the sprinklers, the last few streams of water sputtering to a stop. For the first time that day, my backyard was quiet. Peaceful. Exactly how it was supposed to be. I took a deep breath, savoring the silence. Just as I was about to step inside, there was a knock at my front door. I frowned. The guests were gone. Karen was gone. Who could possibly want to bother me now? I opened the door to find a man in a city uniform holding a clipboard. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mr. Jacobs?" I blinked. "Ah, yeah." He flipped through some pages and handed me a slip of paper. "You've been issued a noise complaint." I stared at him, completely dumbfounded. A noise complaint? From who? He gave me a pointed look. A neighbor? I didn't even need to ask. I already knew. I turned my head to Karen's house. Sure enough, there she was, standing on her porch, arms crossed, smirking. She waved mockingly. I let out a slow breath and turned back to the city official. "You do realize I wasn't the one throwing a party, right?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You were listed as the source of the disturbance." I pinched the bridge of my nose. Unbelievable. He handed me the paper and nodded. "You have a few days to contest it. Have a good day." As he walked away, I looked down at the slip in my hand. A ridiculous fine, all because of her. I glanced back at Karen, still smirking. If she thought this was over, she was wrong. I was just getting started.